So we were talking about sleepwalking versus living,
Yeah,
and really kind of waking up to your purpose and seeing somebody else in the mirror, like this other voice is speaking behind you.
absolutely. So I don't know. I know we got cut off, so I don't know what part of that story got cut off, but should I tell the story again?
Yeah, let's go from like sleepwalking versus living. And if you could shift your camera just a little bit or center yourself in the screen there. Perfect.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So what we were talking, well, you had asked me really like how I segued from teaching yoga into teaching self-love. And I believe that they've always been deeply integrated. I mean, what originally drew me to yoga, in the very, very, very early years was a much more superficial reasons. It was like weight loss and flexibility and, all those things that 19-year-olds are concerned with. But what kept me coming back to yoga was this shift that started to happen on the mat where I actually became kinder to myself in a way that I never had before. I mean, everything I'd ever done was often abusive with myself, whether it was like we talked about the drug abuse or my eating disorder stuff or just my general taskmaster nature. So, being on the mat, and I remember it was like a specific day and a specific pose. I think it was Warrior 3. It was either Warrior 3 or Half Moon pose, but it was a pose that I would often fall out of. And usually when I fell, I would get very upset with myself, and like go down this total shame spiral of like, I shouldn't even be in here and I'm such a fake and what am I doing? And on this day, it was very different. And, on this day, when I fell out of the pose, a voice said, "It's okay, sweetie." And I remember like all but turning around to see who said it because it was almost shocking that this could come from inside of me. But then it started to happen more often. It happened, like when I would be clumsy off of the mat and like, drop them. The specific incident was dropping a bag of quinoa where my normal response would be like expletive, I would be like, this time it was like, "It's okay, sweetie." And it started to happen more and more and more. And as the kind voice became louder than the taskmaster voice, my whole life began to shift. And it was like this weight was removed from my shoulders. So when I started teaching, I was able to identify that in a lot of my students. I would see somebody like berating themselves when they fell out of a mat. I would see the girl, adjusting her shirt to try to cover her stomach and all these things and the heaviness that I used to live my life by. And so to be able to share that message and to help them find that voice inside of them, I mean, that was the ultimate goal. So much like you, I mean, I try to do it in all different ways now. It's not just yoga. It's it's my writing. I do it through I try to do it through my social media. I try to just do it in how I talk to my friends and the advice that I give. But like, if my legacy could be helping others find that voice inside of themselves, to be a little kinder to themselves, to love themselves a little more, then that would be a wonderful legacy to leave.
Definitely. So you began to incorporate positive self-talk for yourself and for your students in a yoga class.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that
And not everybody's open to it. Sometimes I make them like, we'll work on a really hard pose, like crow pose. And afterwards we'll be resting in child. And I'll say like, say to yourself right now, "I am so proud of you." And like, I can feel, it's like somebody thinks it's silly or there's like a little bit of resistance to it. But then I repeat it again. "I am so proud of you." And like, I say it to them, but I say it a few times so that they can start to integrate that into themselves. Like, let that be our mantra. Sure, we can say Satnam and all these really powerful, important things. And I think they are kind of the same thing. Satnam's like, I am that, right? Like, we are all connected. But if we can put it in a tangible way of like, what are you going to say to yourself when you leave here? Well, I am so proud of you. Like, to walk away with that. Who cares if you ever do crow pose, right? At the end of the day. But to walk out of that room with that as your mantra, that's a beautiful pack. That's a great class.
Yeah, there's very little instant gratification when it comes to yoga. You don't begin yoga to be great at it after a day.
Yeah.
At all. And I oftentimes remind myself that if I'm not successful in a jiu-jitsu competition, or if I'm not expertly achieving an Olympic lift, then I'm simply just failing forward. And if I remind myself that even a small step forward is still a step in the right direction. And that's that's my positive self-talk.
And I love that. I mean, it's so important, right? And I love that phrase of failing forward, because, you know, even if we are taking whatever steps back, you know, and I'm making air quotes, like, is it really going backwards? Like, you know, I think sometimes when we're pulled back from something, you know, if like, and I don't know what progress is like, you know, with jujitsu and like, you know, Olympic type lifting, I have no idea. But, you know, sometimes in yoga, it's like you're going to have really good days where like everything's really easy. And then the next day, everything is really hard. And, you know, and then you're going to have like a super healthy year. And then you're going to have surgery one year, you know, and all these things that, you know, but none of it's really taking us back. Like, just because we have that harder day, it doesn't take away from the progress that you had the day before. And if anything, you're going to learn more about yourself on those more challenging days, because it asks you to work in a different way. One where the pose or the practice or the lift or the, you know, sequence is not as important as like you just showing up wholly and authentically.
And consistently.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And
that's
being
so important. Yeah.
So as it comes to facing one of those hard days on the yoga mat or on the jiu-jitsu mat or on the Olympic lifting platform, when people don't have positive self-talk, why is it that they have so much self-doubt?
Well, I think first it's important to say, like, just because we have positive self-talk does not mean that we don't have self-doubt. I feel like, you know, it's kind of the medicine for it, and maybe it's born out of that. But I don't know. I mean, I think so much of it is our culture. I really do. And just the success drive that it feeds into, I mean, you see it in little kids now too, when they're overscheduled and overextended, and you know, this constantly like having to be perfect, the perfection trap that we all fall into. But I mean, I think like, I wish that the positive self-talk was a cure-all for the self-doubt, but I think sometimes the self-doubt allows you to step into that positive self-talk when you're willing to look at it and to unpack it. Not everybody is. Not everybody's willing to look in the mirror in that way.
I've always counseled people and I've always coached people to understand that self-awareness is the key to all growth.
Yeah.
In yoga or in gaining a new perspective on your life through positive self-talk. And this next question's really hard.
Okay.
Because
some of your questions have been hard already. So.
I do have the tendency to challenge.
So it's good. It makes me think in it, because some of my, you know, it's like sometimes you can get robotic in your answers. So no, I appreciate it. You're making me think, which is good.
Yeah, very true. So why is self-love so important to find lasting love?
I mean, that's not hard. I'm married. That's not hard. Oh man, you know, for so long, I was looking for someone to complete me. That, you know, remember that Jerry Maguire line, you know, and it's like you watch all these romantic comedies and you think that somebody's going to come into your life and they're going to take away all of every worry and every anxiety that you've ever dealt with. But then every relationship that I put that pressure on failed, and understandably so, because it's not up to my partner to fulfill those needs inside of myself. What I learned is instead of a partner being someone who completes you, a good partner is somebody that complements you. So being able to show up as a whole person not only allows you to love more wholly, because you're not this constant, like different whole, right? Whole, WHOLE, versus, you being the black hole, HOLE, and trying to, just a pit of neediness. But it also, it makes whatever this person bringing into your life is just a pure enhancement. So I think it's impossible to love someone else fully until you love yourself wholly. We can only give as much as we can give to ourselves. And I think we forget this sometimes. And especially as somebody that's like, a self-proclaimed caregiver and caretaker, where we give. If we're not able to give to ourselves, then we're not really giving to those around us too. And I know that sounds controversial, but I fully believe this. Until we can love ourselves, we cannot love someone else in the same way. We think we can, but is it really love, or is it, what's the word? Like, when you're super reliant on another. I have pregnancy brain right now, but like when you're deeply enmeshed and enabling, right? Or is it an enabling kind of relationship? But for it to be an act of like being able to be a separate person and love this other person, like that needs to come from you loving yourself first.
Yeah, self-love is not selfish. I think that was definitely a point that you were trying to make in the middle there. And when we get stuck in a codependent relationship,
codependency,
we find those holes within ourselves, that of the pieces that we're lacking. We're lacking in those areas, so we're seeking somebody else to fill up that cup. And why self-love is not selfish is because you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
If you're draining yourself every day 100% and pouring into others, and you don't take the time to go to yoga for an hour because you love it, or you don't take the time to lift heavy because you love it, then you're not going to be good for anybody else, especially yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, self-love is not just doing those things that we love. It's also like setting boundaries. It's, that is self-love, right? It's like being able to say like, no, I need quiet right now in this moment, or I need a hug right now in this moment. I mean, that's terrifying to be able to reach out to another person. And it's, I want to be really clear. It's not to say that the other person can't validate you or, fulfill certain needs. Obviously you're not dating a brick wall, you're dating a human being, but it's your desire for it is different, right? I'm very open about my struggle with anxiety my whole life. And, I was constantly looking for partners to fix my anxiety. And, I did a ton of work on myself before I met my husband. And I really do believe that I manifested him. But when I got into this relationship with him, he was doing everything right. And I still had anxiety. As a matter of fact, it was almost worse. And I went to my therapist and I was like, what is happening? And she said, and I was 33 at the time, I'm 37 now. I was 33. She said, did you really think that 33 years of anxiety would just go away when you met the right person? And I was like, yes, I did. But that's not how it works at all. Instead, all that anxiety was coming to the surface, and I was able to be strong enough in myself to own this side of myself, to be like, okay, this is my messy bits, to show them to my husband, who was then loving enough and amazing enough to be like, I'll help you pack these back up for you. So we could actually sit with my anxiety and look at these things, but he wasn't fixing it. He wasn't the solution. It was just that he was able to hold the space for me to be in my own anxiety. And that was because I was strong enough in that moment to recognize, like, this is what I'm bringing to the table. So yeah. I think that's a huge, huge difference.
Boundaries are a big thing in our community, where I love to talk about what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, and when it's totally fine to ask for that quiet time, or, hey, you know what, Sundays are not great for me to date. I say no to the Sunday date, because that's my one day of the week to refuel and refresh and prepare for the next 6 days that are all business all the time. Yeah.
I think you're going to be surprised when you meet your person. That may shift a little, and not because but it's different than like you know, being in a relationship where you're giving that up because, again, it's that neediness or that fear, or you're placating to their schedule. But like, which is right, like, do you know what I mean? Like somebody that's like, you know, they're only available on Sundays, so you make that happen. But I think when you find the right person and they're respectful of that Sunday, something will happen where you're both either able to be quiet together on that day, or you're more willing to open up that space for them and find it somewhere else. Like, I think that, you know, that'll shift, but like, you know, hold that as your safe space and what's important to you is really great that you recognize that.
Yeah, my friends always give me a hard time. Actually, they were giving me a hard time just a couple weeks ago for, Dave, your boundaries are way too strict. And my friend Elise actually said that same exact thing. Is like, when you find the right person, you will kind of bend your boundaries a little bit. And I have in some cases, absolutely. I'm not non-compromising.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm doing around here. I'm simply just self-aware enough to know what the results are if I too early on am too flexible on like the Sunday date. I know what happens.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And if you like, if you get together with somebody that's like Sunday's their day and they're like insistent you go out on Sundays, and then so you bend over backwards to do it, that's not fair, because that's not honoring who you are.
Mhm.
But if, like, let's say it's like you hang out on Saturday night and then it goes into Sunday morning, and then you're like, you know what? Okay. Like she wants to go for a run, and like, so you go for a run together. Like, I think that's more what you're going to find. It's just kind of that flexibility within that. And I think boundaries are a spectrum, right? We can be too flexible, just like we can be too strong. So it's always kind of finding that middle, and it changes, and it really does. I mean, you know, living with my husband, it was really hard. I hadn't lived with somebody other than my mom, but she was sick and it was my mom, and it was very different. I hadn't lived with somebody since I was 21 years old, you know? So it was like 12 years of being by myself with my dog. It was a huge adjustment. And he never asked me to do things other than what I wanted to do, but I did let certain things go. And then, you know, like I would stay up a little later than felt good. I would sleep in a little later than felt good. And I felt like I was kind of losing myself. And so I had to get back to, you know, my routine, which was like, so now and guess who changed their schedule, right? It's like, so now Ben actually goes to bed much earlier. We wake up early together, and, you know, it works itself out.
Yeah, because it's fluid and it's a symbiotic relationship, and we both have our own individual needs that we have to bring together in order to form a partnership.
Yeah.
You made a good point in the middle of what is your motivation for being flexible on your boundaries? Is it to get them to like you more? Because that's not a good reason to flex on our boundaries. Do you agree?
Yeah. So and I think that was the point I was trying to make earlier. So that was really well said, and a good way to sum it up is like, yeah, are you trying to do it to please somebody else? I dated a guy, you know, we had a long relationship, and, you know, where it was like, he wanted to go out every single weekend. And like, I am a like major introvert. Like, if I could never leave my house again, I would be happy. But I did it, you know, and I would go out all the time, and it was like, it wasn't my truth. And I think, you know, versus my relationship now, where it's like, Ben's like, can we go out once in a while? And it's like, okay. And like, but he's right. Like, getting out of the house like once a month and actually like being amidst people is a good thing. So I think, and the motivation behind that is like, yes, I want to please my husband and he's asking for it, but it's also healthier for me to get out of this rigidity of like, I have to be at home, and I get stuck at home.
Mm-hmm.
So the motivation is, I mean, that's the big thing right there, right? Are you doing it to please somebody, to hang on to this relationship? Or is it a willingness to kind of open your world up and to let another person?
Yes, of course. Definitely agree. So when you guys go out together that one night a month, is it to a party, or is it to a dinner, just the two of you, and that's just the social? You're out in public. What's the difference there?
Because he's such a homebody too, so it gets really dangerous. And we love our Netflix and we love our house, but when we go out, we definitely don't go out to parties as much. I mean, like, very, very, very rarely. We'll do concerts. Concerts is a big thing that we do, you know, like once in a while. Movies, kind of, these little outings. I'd love to go to movies more often, and spending time with my family, my brother here, and whenever we have family in town, like we'll go out to dinners with them. But we don't, like our date nights and stuff are usually here. We cook together. We have our quiet, intimate moments here in the house, and we travel a lot together. So that's kind of when we do our date nights and stuff like that. But yeah, it varies.
So
But no, we're not out of the club or anything like that. That's not our style.
which would be very, very draining for an introvert.
Oh my God. Yeah, I can't. And I don't even, concerts are really hard for me too, honestly. Like, and I'm starting to recognize, what I like it's recognizing and honoring that. And that's part of that self-love thing. It's like, and explaining to him too, because even though he's introverted, he's not empathic in the same, not empathic as he's empathic, but he's not as sensitive to being out in public as I am, where I feel everybody's energy around me. And like, even going to the grocery store can be very draining for me. And for him, it's not as difficult. So like the fact that I can recognize that, I can own that part of myself, and then he can be my like safe shield to like help me go out into the world. And then also he knows when I start to get tired at like, 10 p.m. I'm like, dinner's done. Okay, we got to go home.
Wow, you're lucky that you can make it till 10. So I can feel the same way when I go out, and I'm an extrovert that needs a recharge day. And that's why Sunday is so important to me.
Yeah.
Even though I'm not going to say I grow more mature, I'm just growing older, right? And if I'm out, I can last as an extrovert for about 3 or 4 hours in a social situation with more than just one other person. But after that, I'm drained and I've got to go.
Yeah.
It might be because of the task-oriented lifestyle that we live, or just straight, okay, I've been awake for too long today. But for me, I believe it's because I'm drained after expending that much mental and emotional energy in a public situation, in say like a party or a birthday, or even dinner out.
Yeah.
And all that stimulation coming in at one time drains me.
Yeah. I completely understand what you're saying right now. I think something that came up when you were saying that is, you are a healer, right? Like, I think you have that very sensitive, compassionate side. So don't negate the empathic side of it too. And when I say like, like to be an empath, I don't just mean like this ability to be sympathetic to other people. There's like a phrase, there's a woman that wrote the Empath Survival Guide. I don't know if you read this book, but it talks about people that are extremely sensitive, the Empath Survival Guide. I think her name is Judith Orloff. Like, people who are extremely, extremely sensitive, like social situations are draining for them because of this constant taking in of other people's energy. And like, already what we do for a living is a lot of output. Going into a class and teaching for 90 minutes is you speaking out loud for 90 minutes, but it's also holding space for all these different energies as well. So to then be out in a public setting, it's like, yeah, I mean, we have to really manage our energy well, and to be with a partner that understands that is huge. My dream for you is to like find the person that can be with you on Sundays, and the two of you can be quiet together. Right. So it's like, and that's what I find with Ben is like, and I think that's what that was like one of my clues, like, oh, there's something really special in this guy. Like, I'm not tired when I'm around him. I'm energized. I'm fueled.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I've found it where that Saturday bleeds into Sunday. That's why I was laughing when you were talking about it earlier. I found that, and unfortunately, just the timing didn't work out where I was ready, but they weren't. So, yeah. And that's part of the process. That's part of the discovery of yourself with another person. And the way that you describe your husband is that he is complimenting you in that social situation where he can be the shield, I think is what you called it.
Yeah.
And that's not him completing you or filling a void inside of you. That's simply just him being the best partner that he possibly can because you chose him to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't even think he's like, necessarily aware of, it's not like something he has to consciously try to do. It's just simply sitting next to me, Like touch is really important, holding one another's hands, like hugging him, and like, especially in concerts, I get really, I just get overwhelmed in, like, these kind of louder settings or festivals or things like that. But if I can, like, be next to him, like, I always joke that my head fits perfectly in the nook of his shoulder. Like, we were like created together. So, that's an amazing, amazing thing, and again, yeah, it's like you said, it's not anything he's like consciously doing. It's just, it's who we are. It's our match as people, and match in temperament. And he's really outgoing too. Like, as introverted as we are, he's super good in social situations. So it's like, he was the first person where, like, I didn't have to do all the talking. So that's really nice too, because I can just, like, take a back seat and just, hand him the reins, that's the partnership.
Yeah, and it's hard to find. It takes a long time to first discover yourself and then understand what it is that you're looking for. I always tell people, set your intentions. What are you looking for? What do you want? Set healthy boundaries. What are you willing? I hate this phrase. What are you willing to tolerate? But what you tolerate will persist. And then finally, how to learn how to manage your own expectations. Those are the 3 simple steps to really discovering that lasting love that we've been talking about for the past 45 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, the setting the boundaries, like what you would tolerate, I call them like the non-negotiables. Like, what is it that, like, and I can't take credit for this. This was actually another book. I don't know. You probably know this one. It's called If the Buddha Dated.
I don't know
And
that one.
If the Buddha Dated, and she talks about your non-negotiables. Like, what are the things that are, like, unequivocally, if this is not in a relationship, then, this is a no-go, and getting really clear on those, because I think that's the ones where we were talking earlier about, like, the movement of your boundaries is like, when we start to kind of shirk on those, where we let something go a little bit, is when we're not really authentically moving our boundaries with the relationship. So if those are all met, then there's much more willingness to open and expand.
I agree 100%. That was very well said. So if there's one thing that you want to leave us with that we didn't touch on, or you want to expand on, what would that be?
Well, I love, love, love that you asked the question about, the importance of loving yourself in order to find that partner. And I think that's the takeaway here is, like, we are all often, it's a lonely world out there, as connected as we are, we're the loneliness, how do you say it? Loneliness. You know what I mean? we're the most lonely that we have ever been in a very, very long time. I mean, as I mentioned, I'm pregnant right now. We don't have a ton of family around. It's the first time that you're kind of not living within your village. So what happens is we get really desperate to kind of fill those voids in every way possible. And we settle, we forget what our non-negotiables are. And we accept the relationship that like is, a couple inches short of what we're really looking for. And if we're settling for something, if somebody is not meeting, those expectations and those, non-negotiable needs, then are we really loving ourselves by being in this relationship? So the work has to come from us first. Like, how can we be full and whole so that when we meet this other person, that they are then this beautiful complement to who we are, exactly what we've been saying. But it must come from us first. And that means not just having one person try to fulfill all our needs, but going to, yoga classes and having a teacher, going to therapy, having great friends, if you have siblings, being connected with your siblings or your cousins, so that when this person comes into our life, that they can fulfill the role that they're meant to, which is partner.
Awesome. Well said.
Yeah.
If somebody loves your message, where is the best place that they can get a hold of you?
Well, I would love to connect. Thank you. And I'm always open to questions and emails and things. That always makes me feel good. And I love to be of service. So on Instagram, it's sarahezrinyoga.com, or you'll do it on the show notes too, right? I assume. Yeah. Sarah Ezrin Yoga on Instagram. And then my website is sarahezrinyoga.com.
All right. So we'll send people there. Absolutely. We'll put that detail in the show notes in the blog post. And what do you say in the next 6 to 12 months, we do a follow-up and we we do a check-in and see where you're at with this brand new baby, and congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. That would be a lot of fun.
Uh-huh.
He'll
One of
be
our
in the shot.
one of our future guests that we're recording next month. I think she's recording like 2 weeks before her due date. So
Oh my gosh! Wow.
I just love to see the progress of life. In my personal training business, I worked with a woman up until her wedding, up until her first child, after that, up until her second child, and then online with nutrition coaching after that. So
that's so cool.
It's amazing when clients become friends, and then friends become your life. And we just had dinner a week and a half ago, because she's an online client. We don't get to see each other in person very much, and it's a great check-in. It's a great community, extending across the country now.
I love that. And I love what you do. And, thank you for your offerings and the message that you're bringing, not just for the dating world, but it really is that greater message of self-love and, self-care. So thank you for all that you do as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, what I'm discovering is that these principles are universal, whether you're dating or whether you're in a relationship. And I didn't get to ask one question that I really wanted to. And I think it's a simple yes or no, is like, do you still need self-love when you're married?
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
You're laughing at me because, it's been 14 years since my marriage ended, and I don't remember ever even having the concept of self-love, self-awareness, individuality. So here we are 14 years later trying to figure out how to put the pieces all back together and how to clean up this mess.
Yeah, but I think it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier, right? Where it's like, maybe you call it failing forward, but I think of it as like even those things that didn't work out in the way that we thought that they should, all of those are lessons and building us up towards the next thing. So it's all working towards that. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, the dog walker just came.
Thank you again, Sarah. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everything. And I'm just so happy for all that you're doing out in the world. It's a really great gift. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. We'll talk
All
soon.
right, take care. Bye.